Hello. So I still have a friend, a close friend named Juan, and before he was a software engineer, he was a chef. And he had this point that he made to me, God, like 9 years ago, kind of like relating like that a good like chef or cook like knows their tools incredibly well. Like the concept of like mise en place, of like getting everything organized and ready to go before you sit down to like do your work. There's a lot of other fields where like running around and being kind of like doing things very like tediously or manually like is not going to work, right? As a software engineer, because we are like mostly sitting in front of the computer and like it's minor movements with our hand and stuff along those lines, it doesn't always feel like maybe not having the best handle on all our tools is really slowing us down. Because like, to be clear, like I joke that like a large part of software engineering is not necessarily the writing of the code, but like the thinking of the problem. That said, I do think that like there is something to be said for getting really, really, really comfortable with your tools to kind of like clear that part of your brain out. Right? It is easier to think big brain thoughts if all of the mechanics of like manifesting it on the screen is relatively straightforward. You're not thinking about like, oh, how do I get over to that file, or where is that thing? All those things are kind of distracting you from pulling apart the big problem. And so what we want to do today is sit down with many people's favorite editor. I won't quote all the various different state of JavaScript surveys, whatever, but like generally speaking, much to the chagrin of the Emacs group, Visual Studio Code tends to be a relatively popular editor, and one that I think is worthwhile to sit down and learn. I'm coming from, when I say coming from, I mean like a decade ago, TextMate. So, you know, it was only to go up from there. So we're going to kind of go through like everything, like all the various different parts of VS Code, whether you are brand new to VS Code or you've used it all the time. There will probably be something where you're like, oh, that makes my life 1, 2, 10, 75, 1000% easier, right? And we'll kind of like cover all the various areas and go like into a little more depth than you might in your normal day-to-day. I think it is worthwhile to spend a little bit of time just sitting down with the tool itself and learning the ins and outs of it. A lot of times we are using the tool while solving some other problem and learning just about enough to get the job done and no more than that. So let's spend some time together. Let's get it. Let's learn all the like, kind of moving pieces. Some things are going to resonate with you and be like, I'm going to use that every day. Some things are like, that's good to know, right? And like that will be probably slightly different for every single person. But the goal is to figure out how to kind of take this editor and make it yours, right? Not necessarily, I'll show you some of my settings and some of the extensions I use, totally, but then also like kind of give you the inroads to figure out all the things that you want to do for your particular use case, because not only do you probably have different preferences as a human being, and that's great, you probably work in various different code bases. Maybe it's a full stack TypeScript code base. Maybe it's like you don't even control the back end. Who knows? Maybe you need 17,000 Docker containers to get anything running. These are all these are all things I have dealt with in my life at various points. So we'll kind of look at what those things are. You can kind of like pick and choose and craft the experience around that. Part of that, too, as we kind of go through this, is if there are things that, little tricks that whether you're in the room with me right now on the chat, definitely let's bring those up and kind of like explore those things together. Because like my perspective might not be the only perspective. I would like to think it is, but it is, it turns out it might not totally be. And no matter what, as I kind of mentioned before, my aspiration is that there is something, many things, a dozen things, depending on if you're like, hey, I just came from a JetBrains IDE to like, I'm learning how to code, to I've been doing this for a really long time, but like there's whole parts of VS Code that I don't touch because I don't know what they are, and ain't nobody got time for that, right? So regardless, if you are all front end, great. If you also need to do some back end stuff and worry about, like having containers and stuff along those lines, awesome. Like we'll kind of navigate all of that together. And by the end, you will be able to kind of like navigate around and customize everything to your liking, so on and so forth, right? Some caveats, which are, like I said, more so than usual. Like feel free to like ask questions, pose suggestions, especially because like the nature of how we like of the of what we have to do right now is like, hey, we're gonna start from line 1 and code something all the way down. This is more of like, let's jump into our editor and wander around. So if there is something that's interesting or something like that's confusing to me, like let's talk about it. Or maybe something that like a little trick that you've picked up along the way, let's also discuss that as well. The high level is we're going to talk a little bit about getting around the editor because that's important. We're going to talk about all of the things that are repetitive and not big brain thoughts and how to make those as easy as possible. And then making sure that like we have consistent environments. If you work on a big enough team, somebody's development environment is broken at all times, right? I meant to get such and such task done, but I couldn't get whatever to spin up. So we'll talk a little bit about how to like manage that. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about how to build your own Visual Studio Code extensions, because turns out, I'm going to assume that everyone's got a little passing like knowledge of JavaScript, the JavaScript programming language, given that we're on frontendmasters.com. And so insofar that we relatively know a lot of the moving pieces to make VS Code extensions, we'll kind of take a look at that too, because maybe you can start building out some of your own tooling. So we'll look at some existing extensions, we'll look how to build our own extensions, we'll use the editor to build extensions for the editor. It's gonna be great. Awesome. So let's do the businessy stuff, which is we've got a course website. As I said to everyone in the room, the prerequisites, you're probably gonna need to download Visual Studio Code if you don't have it in a full course on Visual Studio Code. That is the one core prerequisite. If, when we get into some of the container stuff, if you don't have Docker Desktop and you would like to do that stuff, you can download it sometime between now and then. There is also this little repository here of little sample silly apps, just because it is hard to explain how to use an editor without something to edit. That said, I would say that if whatever code base that you work on day to day or one that you know your way around, I would open that up too, right? Because I think sometimes it is very hard to simulate a large real world code base, and you might have one. So I think we can apply a lot of those things to our own code bases, so on and so forth. As you can see, we've got an outline, right? The aspiration is some of this stuff is just kind of extra information, appendix. If somebody asks a question, we wander there, so on and so forth. But like I said, the nature of this workshop is not initial commit, step 1. Step 2 is wander around the editor. So if you see something in the notes that I didn't cover, assume that I forgot. But not totally forgot because it's in the notes, but assume in the act of talking to you and looking at my screen and thinking my next thought, I missed a thing or two. So some of that is just, no way do we get to all of this, but we can also kind of then, it's a menu in which you can select from as well. And if there are areas of particular interest, we can dive in deeper. If there are things that are I don't know if I would use that, we can kind of navigate that as a group. So I'll give everyone just a few minutes to get everything downloaded, ready to rock and roll, and then we'll jump into exploring the editor itself. A minute.
Just a side question. Which container do you guys use?
I have to use Kalima on my machine.
Yeah, I'm just curious if the dev container stuff will work with other things like Kalina or other, other than Docker.
I don't know, I will use Docker.
Yeah,
Let's assume no, but
I just didn't know if you kind of knew
No.
off the top of your head if that was the case.
maybe.
Maybe. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Let's find out.
And then whenever you want to pick back up, go for it, Steve.
All right. Just close some things. All right, let's do it. Everyone got an editor open? Ready to rock and roll? Sweet. So this is Visual Studio Code. You might have seen it before. Some tasty notes as I jump in. I mostly set all of my environment back to like standard vanilla setup. Some changes are like left some extensions installed because when we get to exploring extensions, watching me install them one by one seemed terrible. Right? So some of them are installed, but other than that, I wiped away all of my key bindings, all of my snippets, everything. So I'm hopefully starting as close to a tabula rasa as anyone else. You do not need to do the same, but I do because I'm the one teaching. So one quick setting that I'm going to just take a look at, which is mostly for me, and probably something Dustin's going to edit out, but it's fine, is I'm just going to turn up my font because I turned it down last night because it's a very small screen. Very small. Awesome. So,
And
yes.
One other thing, just because it was a question in the chat, opening VS Code from the command line. Do you want to like talk or mention that just so it's
Yes.
of course?
It's almost like you knew my next thought. So, I've got the examples open, but let's say that you don't. There are a number of ways to go about doing it. One is to go up to the File menu, find Open. I have never done this. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about today, which is like, it's a thing that you can do that I have never done. Why? Not totally sure. Like, seems like a totally reasonable thing to do. The other option is you can go ahead and there is a ability, if you hit Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P, because if I say Control or Command, if you are on Windows, swap it, unless I'm very explicit that I really meant Control. Then we'll talk about it later. But we will talk a little bit more about the command palette in a second, but the command palette is your best friend. But there is something fun in here that if you have not done this before, you should definitely look at doing, which is this install code command in your path. And this will install a little binary. Well, it's technically already installed. It'll put it in your path. That will let you go navigate around your terminal, and then you can type code dot or code a given folder, and it will open that folder in VS Code. So like anywhere you are on the command line, you can type in code dot for the current folder. If you want to open a different folder, what have you, so on and so forth. We'll be doing both today because like in the beginning, I'm just going to start in the main repo. But like as you can tell, if you download the repo, it's a bunch of little smaller projects. Sometimes we will like laser focus into one of those, and so we'll kind of navigate up, down, and around. But I've already installed this. Otherwise, if that's not working for you for some reason, open will always also work. But like I said, 99.99999% of the time, I will usually use the command line, navigate there, and then open it in VS Code. But upon doing that, we should be welcomed by this beautiful, lovely, empty editor. Some things probably need no introduction. Over here we have like the files in the directory, obviously a full file tree of everything in there. This is the kind of the activity bar along the side where you'll see, your file explorer, the ability to search across the entire project, some source control, this ability to run and debug things, extensions, and this is where it gets a little squirrely, which is depending on the extensions, other stuff might appear here. Like we have some integration with various testing tools. In this case, I do have GitHub Actions in here, GitHub pull requests, and this little AI toolkit, which we'll talk about later, because that's very cool. You've got a status bar down here, which will kind of show you the different kind of file type that you might be working with, as well as some other fun little things down here as well. When something turns bright red, pay attention to it, but generally speaking, it's subtle for a reason. If you ever forget the command palette's keystroke, which is Command-Shift-P, which will probably get worn out on your keyboard by the end of the day, you can also just click here too. One of the things I want to point out, and we'll see this over and over and over and over again, is if anything has a key binding, you will see it in the command palette. The practice that I want to instill in you right now is anytime, today, in the future, whenever, you catch yourself doing something like somewhat like tedious, pause, hit Command-Shift-P, and just like search to see if there's an option to do it a little bit easier. Maybe it has a key binding, maybe it doesn't. We'll figure out how to give it one if you want to, so on and so forth, right? Because we will talk about some of the keyboard shortcuts. I will tell you them. I will do stuff with my hands to make them happen on my screen. Will you memorize all of them the very first time I say a keyboard shortcut out loud? No. Right? Kind of the best way to do it is to, and again, install the habit right now of like, if you catch yourself doing something where like, there's like, I think a lot of like Vim users want to talk about the fact that every time you reach for the mouse, it's like a drain to your productivity. I understand where my trackpad is in relation to my keyboard, that it's not that big a deal these days. But I think the idea is still there, right? Because like if you find yourself, oh, I want to jump to the other editor pane, or oh, I want to jump over to search, or something along those lines. Like right now installing the like feeling of pausing, thinking about it, just even sometimes going into the command palette, because there's also like a lot of little things that maybe you didn't even know were in there, and some of them will only be important to you if you find yourself doing them, right? The other way to find out some keystrokes sometimes is if you hover over stuff, sometimes they will be revealed to you, right? So that's how you switch from the Explorer to search, is hovering over these various things and seeing what the various keyboard shortcuts are in this case. But like I said, we've got like a little, there's a little folder in here called Playground, which is a very, very exciting file. He says, thinking you understand, alphabetical order. And there's like some little stuff in here. We can put this back in a little bit. But there are lots of little things like, you can say like apple, carrot, grape, banana. You could select all these things. Let's say I want to sort them ascendingly, right? I could look up how to do that. I could do it by hand, or I can hit Command-Shift-P, just type in sort, and see that I've got sort lines ascending, sort lines descending. Great, awesome. Pick that and it'll just do it. So anytime you find yourself pausing and thinking, stop, just type the thing into the command palette for a second. Just see if it's there already. If not, we'll explore extensions, we'll talk about all sorts of other stuff, and key bindings and snippets. But step one, annoying thing that I was about to break my train of thought and stop thinking big brain thoughts to do, pause, Command-Shift-P, see if there's an option, right? There's all sorts of things from like sorting lines to removing duplicates, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the like subtle subconscious practice that we're going to do through this entire time together, which is at any given point. And the nice part is, I think like an hour ago, Steve said something about I can split editor panes. I don't remember. You just Command-Shift-P and you type split, and there's the keyboard shortcut. Or other options that maybe you didn't even know were there. And some of them don't have keyboard shortcuts. And sometimes they have crazy ones like this. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. So on and so forth. But you can kind of see all of these kind of like fun things, like about like code folding and what level you want to fold everything to, so on and so forth. Join lines, great. Anything you might need to do, pause, stop, Command-Shift-V, or just click this thing up here, whatever. But if you find yourself clicking it, that's, again, the practice. Learn the shortcut, right? You'll be happier, because then like all of a sudden it becomes muscle memory, and you find yourself standing in front of a podium trying to explain in words stuff that has become second nature to you. And so that's kind of how you build it up as well. Cool, but let's talk a little bit about the rest of the editor. So we've got, this Explorer and other activities over here. We have some other fun options. There is a panel down here with more different things. Most notably for our purposes, 90% of the time, is this integrated terminal, which for the most part should be very much like the terminal that you open Visual Studio Code from, but now you can be all in one place, right? Because a lot of our day-to-day lives are try thing, maybe you have tests, hopefully you have tests, you don't have tests. Try things, go to browser, see if works, go back, so on and so forth, right? And so the more that we can kind of do without the context switching, like the more micro decisions we can make every day, right? A lot of times it is like, it's going to take me 100 attempts to get this right. If I can cut down the time of each attempt by 10, 20, 50%, guess what? I can make more decisions every day, and all of a sudden I look like a 10x developer. The real way to be a 10x developer is multiple cursors, which we'll talk about later. But if you have 10 cursors, you're clearly a 10x developer. It scales. Great. So we've got this panel here. As you can see, you can open and close that with this little icon up here. Same with this one. Then we have another bonus panel over here that you can have various different, you can like assign different things in here as well. Hit this little plus. In this case, it's like 2 of the extensions. I'm going to tell you how often I open this panel. Never. I never open it. I didn't even know it was in this panel until I was preparing for this. So we've got that. We've got this main editor here as well. There's some little information. That's my doc. There's some information down here about what language we're in, some other fun things, what line, what my spacing is, so on and so forth as well. And you know, like most things, we can open up more than one file. So, you know, we can click here. Now we've got 2 tabs. Awesome, right? And we can hit, in this case, Command, Shift, and then a square bracket, go back and forth between the 2 of them. We can also, if we need a little more room, because we want a 13 or 14-inch MacBook, you can hit Command B or Control B, I think. I'm going to be honest with you, like, I have not used a Windows computer in 25 years. So some of those are from memory. But you know what happens if I get one wrong? Command-Shift-P, and you can see what it is. Especially because over time, you will write your own key bindings and go on your own path, and there'll be none of the default ones as we go along as well. So we can hide and show that as well. We can also split in 2. So if we hit Command backslash, and we're all going to find out who has 1Password installed at the same time, because that might be taken by 1Password, at which point you just turn it off or change it, either in 1Password or here. You can split between 2 editors, so you can see things side by side. So yeah, these are some empty files at this point that we can just play around in for various different exercises. But if I wanted to get from this left pane to this right pane, how would I do it? It's a trick question, by the way.
Use your mouse.
Okay. Yes, that was not the trick question answer that I was looking for, but I'm into it. That's technically, you're not wrong. There's a few other ways to discover these keyboard shortcuts, right? Because like I said, I can say them to you. They are written down in some of the notes that I shared in the beginning. You're not going to memorize them at first. You're not going to memorize them until you do them 1,000 times, right? So the first thing we want to do is figure out what the discovery process is here, right? We know Command-Shift-P is one of them, right? So we can go like close editors in the left group. That's interesting, right? Move editor group left, move the editor left, so on and so forth, right? The other way to kind of discover some of the options is to find out what's just hanging out in the menu. We saw that we can learn keyboard shortcuts by hovering over stuff. We can also go ahead and like switch editor or switch group. Because I'm in the same file. Why are these gray? Figure that out in a second. But we've got the ability to kind of jump back and forth across these 2. Not sure why they're grayed out at this exact moment. It's kind of like I'm tempting the demo gods in this case. Let's go ahead, open this one. And this one. Why are they all grayed out on me? Well, I'll check that out in a second. But in this very subtle, poorly contrasted setup here, you can also see what some of the keys would be if they were working at this point. But we'll figure that out in one moment. Sometimes you have to turn it off and turn it back on again, but I don't think that's my issue. But we'll see. All right, so we've got the ability to have various different panes. There are a whole bunch of different layouts that you can use. For instance, like, I'm going to take a moment and find out why this is all grayed out, because like one would argue, I got a window open. Don't embarrass me, VS Code. Apparently, turning it off and turning it back on was the solution. So if you find yourself live opening your editor in front of people and things aren't working as expected, there's nothing as clear as turning it off and turning it back on. Cool. So the important part here is to see some of the options, because again, like the patterns that I have to use to get around like my code base might not be the same as yours, right? And we'll talk about all the various flavors and stuff along those lines. But kind of, again, the practice of catching yourself, if you find yourself, again, clicking on this side or clicking on that side, like what would it be, right? And so we've got switch editor and we've got switch group, right? An editor is any given one of these tabs. A group is like any given one of these panes, right? And so we can see that if I hit Command 2, I jump over to the second pane here. You can see my cursor is flashing at this point. 1, I'm back over here. 2, 1, 2, 1. You can go ahead and like you can see that you've got lots of different layouts. You can go. Some of these are more appropriate for the 27-inch studio display I have at home. But if we wanted to, we could go to a like 4x4 grid. We can see that there's no actual files here. If you need to move an editor, you have a few choices, right? You could learn the keyboard shortcut, but I'm going to stop harassing you about that for a moment. You can also drag a tab over and move it, right? I'm going to be honest with you. I do it a lot, right? Like, you know, again, my trackpad is not that far. So you can drag various files over as well. And now you can do a 1, 2, 3, 4, and jump around just like that. Did I open a fifth one? I don't need a fifth one. The other option, if we go in here and check it out as well, is more likely you can kind of either go to the next or previous group, which does not have one, or you can do like a group to the left, group to the right. And this one will actually like move it and stuff along those lines as well. Like I said, some of it, this is obviously at this point a very complicated setup, but like generally speaking, again, you will not memorize them all in one hit. Find them, kind of like get into the flow. When you see yourself trying to do something, those are the patterns you want to optimize. Memorizing literally everything I yell at you is probably not the way forward. But to know where the options are and what you can do, and the idea that like sometimes half the battle is knowing that you can just jump back and forth between the different panes, right? And there's a few other options. There is like going back and forward. The other ones that I think are super useful is we've got Command P, which looks like the command palette, but you'll notice something slightly different here. In this case, it is files. And you can search for any file in your code base. You know, you can start typing in like package.json. You'll see something along the lines of all the package.jsons in your project and the ability to pick which one. Now, here's the thing about Command P and Command Shift P. You're going to mess it up, right? You're going to mean to open the command palette, and sometimes you'll see the files. You could close it. But let's take a look at, we'll see like who's got their like I Spy like gold medal today, which is if I hit Command P, I see the file switcher, not Command O. That's a different thing that I never want. If I hit Command Shift P, what's the difference in the contents of that input field?
There's a caret in there.
It's a caret in there, right? Which is nice because it means if you hit Command P and you meant to hit Command Shift P, you just typed a caret and you're in the same place. If you did the opposite, you delete the caret and you're in the same place. The only difference between those two views is whether or not they put a caret in there for you, right? So either one is an option as well. There's also this pound sign, which, oh, what's this? This is actually super useful, by the way. This is in the given editor that you're in, all of the quote-unquote symbols, right? Or this is actually in that project itself, right? So if if all your functions are poorly named, this is not super helpful for you. But if you've got like we've all got those very like, the ones that like maybe pull in from an API and format your data or something along those lines. If you know the name of the function you're looking for, you can try to guess what file it's in. Hopefully you've made that easy on yourself. But if you haven't, you can also just kind of do this. And this is looking for a symbol, right? And so this is the same as go to symbol in editor, right? Command-Shift-O as well. And so here you can jump to a given function, right? And see it as well. And we'll see some other ways to kind of jump around later. But again, like I'm repeating it over and over and over again because it bears repeating at the beginning of this workshop. For all of the things, pausing, anytime you catch yourself not thinking your big brain thoughts, think about, well, why? What am I doing? And yes, the act of thinking about why is a further distraction from your big brain thought. I get that, 100%, right? But we're trying to do nice things for future us and not current us in this case. Cool. So we split editors. The other option that you can do, there's things that you learn about an editor when you're preparing to teach a workshop on an editor. You can also like open the same file in a new window as well. I have never wanted to do that in my life. I will split my editor 1,000 ways on a big enough screen. I have never wanted to do that. The other feature that I think is probably better for writing than it is for coding is we've also got Zen mode, right? Which kind of like focuses you in. And you can change some of the settings here where you can only see a line or two. Very probably good for writing a bunch of markdown. Usually not what I want when I'm coding. But more importantly, if you find yourself in this view, that's how you got there as well. Cool. And any of these are changeable. We'll talk a little bit about keyboard shortcuts in a bit. But if we have tabs, we have got Command, Option, Tab, or Control, Alt, and the arrows rather. These will, and this will actually split across panes as well. So if I have this one here, I can kind of walk across the different tabs that I have, and it'll go from the first editor group to the second editor group, so on and so forth. As well, we can, like I said, we can jump between the different editor groups. Like I said, you've got that 1, 2, 3, 4, or you've got the ability to kind of move up, down, left, and right as well. The other one is, anyone ever have a failing test? Has that ever happened to any of you? Yeah? There's a bunch of really cool tricks. Like sometimes you can probably just Command or Control click on it and open it. But like, let's say you get something where it's like, or maybe you saw it in like the GitHub action or CI/CD, where it's like, you have a problem on such and such file, line 235, column 197, right? Let's go over to this one again. The other nice thing you can do is Control G, or again, you just go to line / column, and you could, first of all, it tells you where you are right now, but you could also say that I want to go to line, 25. That'll take me to line 20, 25. I can jump to whatever line I need to jump to, and it'll shoot me down there as well. Again, the little things just for jumping around, because like, yeah, in a 40-line file, not a big deal. We all know the file I'm talking about. You have that file. We all have that file. We regret that file. Maybe it's like some kind of like auto-generated like data or something along those lines. We all have the file. Each one of our 1,000-line files are different. Sometimes they are deeply problematic, but we all have them. And so here we can jump around super easily. The other one that honestly is like worth the price of admission alone to this workshop is what I'm gonna call go to bracket. It's not that I'm gonna call it go to bracket because it is called go to bracket, right? And that is why I'm going to call it go to bracket. So we, again, go to bracket is this Command Shift /, and what it does is, let's say you were in this case, these parentheses, as you can see very subtly, it will jump to the closing bracket, right, from the opening to the closing. There is another useful one that we will put a key binding to a little bit later, which is, again, and the way that I discovered this one is going, I really wish VS Code did this. Half the time, when you really wish VS Code did something, it might. And what do? You open up the command palette. We sent you the theme here, which is, then you just type in bracket. There is also select to bracket, which would select everything in between two brackets. You will notice that this does not have a key binding. You can control all of that. We will get there. We have an agenda. I promise you. We will talk about key bindings. But again, some of this starts with, I really wish it would do such and such. And then, again, training the ability to go in there and find something. I have never wanted, I guess there's a world where I might want to do that one. But like, that's, select a bracket again, just to show you the go to bracket. Except that I have definitely changed that one and overloaded it at this point. But you can jump back and forth between them. You will also find all the different places where you have other apps that have taken over keyboard shortcuts. We will talk about ways to like dedupe that, and at least on Mac OS see what some of them are as well. So here we've got go to bracket. It will jump between the two of them. Other fun ones is that terminal we saw before. You can open it up either, again, there's a terminal command here, but we can also hit, in this case on a Mac, Control backtick, and it will open up the terminal. Now, the interesting one, again, this is where like there are some things that do not happen out of the box. We will fix them all later as, again, we begin to build our own lightsaber, which is to get back to the editor, you can hit either Command 1 to get back to the first editor or 2 to the second one. There's not really a great way out of the box to get back into the terminal, because if you hit, I think I've actually, you can see if it works on yours, but like, I think you can set one up so you can go back and focus to it if it's already open. And we will set that up together in a little bit. But you can jump around. Again, these are all the things where that's not that hard, right? I also have a very small screen right now. Not that I'm complaining about that the entire time, but right now I am. But like all of those things, if we can get all those little micro things down to the point where we can just think our big brain thoughts and the rest becomes muscle memory, we are happier people. Are you going to memorize all these immediately because I said them once or because you read the notes? Probably not. But if you just, again, build the habit of catching yourself and jumping down there, you will see all of the various pieces as well. Like I said, there's a lot of work to do to like customize the editor, all the ways that make us happy. Again, the ways that make me happy might not be the ways that make you happy. And we'll talk about how to like personalize and customize it in a little bit. But out of the box, these are some of the high level ones that we have as well. They're in the kind of course website. I did like grab some of the common ones and make some pretty tables with what the various shortcuts are. Again, on ones that like, I got carried away. Like I put copy and paste in there. Like, I don't know. But some of the common ones that you might need and use, because watching me go through every keyboard shortcut one by one is probably a form of torture. So there is a reference again, but pop quiz. What's the best way to figure out what the keyboard shortcut is for something?
Use the command palette.
Use the command palette, right? Again, building that habit will not solve your problems overnight, but probably over like a week or two it will. So that's not a bad timeline. I'm into it. Cool. So that's kind of some of the like long and short of the editor layout as well. Just checking real quick if I've got other like big brain thoughts. Oh yeah, the other thing you can do in there as well is if you hit the up arrow, you can kind of also like move through some of the things as well. Again, it's a fuzzy search. So you can kind of like explore. As you can see, a lot of these have a little gear, right? That is the ability to add a key binding to it. We will talk about that dedicated in its own little piece in a second or two, but kind of to give a little spoiler alert, right? You can kind of see some of where we're going to go with this. as well. Cool. Let's pause, Dustin. I'm going to take a sip of water.
You don't need us to go to break or anything, right? You just.
I was checking with you if you needed to go to break to export.
Nope,
video.
I think we're good for another 20. Right?
Love it.
Give or take.
All right. So a lot of talk about you can set your own key bindings. So let's talk about it. So like I said, if you find anything in here that you might want to use and it does not have a key binding, guess what? You can make one. In fact, there's a bunch of ways to do this. You could also just do let's find what's one that we want to add. I don't know. Let's see what we've got in here right now. So you have a file somewhere, depending on your operating system, where applications keep their settings, that has all of your key bindings. Now, it is a JSON file. This is great for a few reasons. VS Code does have a thing called settings sync, which will sync your settings. Does what it says on the tin. Having it as a JSON file, which is true for almost all of our settings, will also allow you to like copy and paste them, which sometimes is super useful if you want to share them or something along those lines. You can kind of take something, immediately have the JSON. So this is one I set up earlier that we kind of saw, and we'll talk about the moving pieces in here, which is, as I said before, I'm actually going to delete this one for a second so we can see. If I go in here, we close this for a second. Hitting Control backtick will open and close the terminal, but like that was never what I wanted, and it drove me crazy. What I want to do is like do things here, go back over to terminal, right? And then kind of jump back and forth. So one of the key bindings that we can add is, again, we saw that one here as well. You can also see, if you see 2 in a row, you just type them 2 in a row, right? So in this case, like desired key combination, you can press anything you want. Hold your favorite chord. What's the most egregious thing I can press? Right. And here we've got a command ID and then when, right? The command ID, everything in VS Code has some kind of identifier, whether it's a setting or a given command, it's got some kind of like, almost like an object notation of like editor, dot, focus, whatever, right? We look up here, it's like workbench, action, terminal, focus, right? And the other interesting part is there is IntelliSense in here, which is pretty cool. So you could do something like this, and you will see all of the options, but you can also begin to like take a look and try to figure out which one you were looking for. Now, there's probably an easier way to do that, which is, again, let's say the sort lines ascending, right? We could go ahead and give it a key binding of, again, whatever you want that to be. If you are coming from an editor where it has a keyboard shortcut, you could choose to use that. I cannot because TextMate, it was F5, which is like used in VS Code. So we could do something like Command-Shift-Option-S, right? Because I probably messed up. Oh, I have. If you open a file and have unsaved changes and then you change in another editor, things get zapped on you. So let's go ahead. We'll change that. Let's open up. Oh, caret in front, and that's how we do it. So yeah, you can see that this is like finding the one that is for sort lines ascending. It currently has no key binding. What happens when we clear out the search? It's all the options, right? And so for whatever you wanted to do, you can just go in here, search for the thing you were looking for. If you hit the gear, it will hyper-focus the search for you. If you just kind of open up this keyboard shortcuts pane, you will see all the things, right? As well as where they come from, right? The built-in ones come from system, obviously the ones you define. So like, even if I don't remember the whole one, I know it's terminal focus, right? There it is, right? You can see my user one versus all the ones built into the system, right? So you can edit that JSON file. You can also just go in here and come up with one as well. The name of the action is here as well, but you probably found it the normal way, the key binding. The interesting part is this when, right? Which is sometimes you only want the keyboard shortcut to like work in certain situations, right? And the more granular you get here, because you only have so many keys on your keyboard and so many modifiers, right? And you can start doing that weird Command K other thing, like, and start setting up entire chains and do weird things like bending your hands in unnatural ways to try to hit Command, Option, Control, Shift, or whatever. But the other option is to kind of get a little bit more granular on when something should work, right? So for instance, you can, and we'll look at a list in a second, you can say, hey, only when I'm in an active editor, or only in the Explorer, or only when I'm editing a JavaScript file, right? And get really granular about when you want one of these to happen, and kind of see those as well, right? So, you know, obviously there are some like very common ones, but there's a very long list as well for anything you might ever possibly want to see. I think some of the ones that you will see most common is, you know, editor text focus. You saw it before in that terminal one, it had terminal focus. So like you can have different keystrokes that only work when you're in the integrated terminal. And maybe they do something different when you're in the editor. That kind of gets you like double bang for your buck if your brain can handle that. But ideally, if you get to the muscle memory, your brain steps out of the equation for a little bit. The other one that we saw before is if it is just a true false, then you get to the point where like you can just put it in there. If you want to say, does it equal something, you can kind of say like, okay, if I am in a JavaScript file, and we will see various like abbreviations for TM, which actually does, for all the joking that I do, stand for TextMate. Which one of the things that editor brought to the table, which is, let's say you're in a TypeScript file. It knows that TypeScript is like a superset of JavaScript. So anything that would work in the JavaScript context also works in the TypeScript context. If you are in a JSX file, that is technically JavaScript React, which is all of JavaScript plus JSX. TSX files get you into like a language mode called TypeScript React, which is all of JavaScript, all of JavaScript React, all of TypeScript, right? And so like there is a cascade, kind of like subclasses as well. So you do need to be a little bit careful about that. But terminal focus, the diff editor for when you're doing a git diff, you have different commands for like resolving conflicts, right? Again, all the things you find yourself doing by hand, if there's not a shortcut, you can give it one for yourself. That's a very personal journey, and you should decide what works for you, given whatever keyboard layout you have. Like I've got a big boat of a keyboard at home, versus if you're always on a MacBook, so on and so forth. I got like an F20 key that I can play with, but like that kind of changes. Some other ones that are like, as I went through, because there's a lot, I'll show you how to see all of them in a second, and to debug which one you're in one moment. Some other like fun ones that like, maybe as I looked at the big list, could be useful to you. Again, like sidebar focus, sure. Extension name, I don't know. Like maybe if you're doing something like .test.ts or JS or .component or .module.css, you could like opt for certain things to behave differently. Again, like some of this will be dictated by the nature of your code base, but like, that said, almost always that option is there. A lot of the logical operators that we know and love from JavaScript with one less equal sign work in here as well. So it's double equals instead of triple equals. But generally speaking, you can see if it's like, okay, if it's in the terminal focus and I've got a terminal open, or like if it is in an editor and it's a JavaScript file, right? Or, Ruby. What have you. Like if it's like for inserting a comment, right? Like certain languages have the same comment syntax, right? C and JavaScript, for instance, as well. If you want to find out, like, if you've taken this to like its natural conclusion and you're really trying to get super granular, VS Code is an Electron app. An Electron app is effectively Node and Chrome blended together, which means you can toggle the developer tools. And that looks like something we know and love as well. And so now you could do something like I wanted the other one. Expect context keys, and you get this fun red thing here, which kind of looks like when you're inspecting an element in Chrome. And let's say, I don't know what this file is. Let's go back to this other file over here. Find something, and you will see this giant object. If you really ever want to know what are all the things I can when in a key binding, well, this is the answer to your question, and now you know why I didn't put the full list on the website. And like this will change depending on the extensions you have installed too, right? You can see like all these GitHub ones, I'll give you a lucky guess which extension added those, right? But if you are trying to figure out, like you can kind of grab a given thing in the editor and get all the true and falses, right? Obviously you're gonna get more falses than trues, right? But like you can say like, okay, input focus is true. I think editor focus, which is, I'm not finding it anytime soon, will also be true in this case, so on and so forth.
Can I ask
Right.
a question?
Yeah.
So can you chain these together with like when this and this is true and this and like you just keep
Yeah,
combining things?
absolutely. So if we check out like, this is like a system one, and you can actually go in there and see all the system ones too because it's a JSON file. You can kind of get a sense of what it might look like for some of these. Like for focus terminal, my user one, terminal has been created because I'm using the same keystroke as creating a new terminal pane. So if terminal has been created and it supports terminal, there's ways to disable it, right? Because then don't do anything. But like for any of these, you can use end-to-end, ors, equals, right? You get a few of the logical operators where you can kind of like get granular like on exactly when this ought to work. That said, the more complicated you make this, it's like one of those things when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't, kiss your morning goodbye, right? Because you will tweak this, But if you're getting like false positives, I think it's better to then, I wouldn't start out egregious with like a very long logical chain, right? I would start out with like the simplest possible option, and then if I got false positives when it was triggering when I didn't want it to, get a little bit more granular over time. And like I said, at any point you can toggle those developer tools and do the, go back over here, and do the inspect context keys, find exactly where you would have been or want to be in this case, and you will get all of the true and false values, and you can kind of work backwards from there. That way you're not playing a weird guessing game, because like the simpler version of this is randomly guess, or let's be honest with ourselves, copy and paste things you found from the internet, which probably works most of the time, honestly, for simple things. But if you're getting if you're in some bespoke language where there's not a lot of, if you're in a Lua file inside of whatever, you might be on your own a little bit. And you can kind of deduce it from here as well. Like I said, you can see this, you can take a look at everything. It's great, awesome, whatever. And see all the various things you might want to dial in. Most of these, I don't know what they do. Right? And a lot of them are put in by plugins, so on and so forth. Cool. So what else do we have to say about that? Like I said, I put some of the common ones on the page as well. If you do have two that override, it will try to yell at you and tell you as well. Sweet. This is probably only important if you want to make an extension that provides key bindings that you can. So as we know, for reasons that nobody quite understands, Windows and Linux use control for everything. Mac OS uses command. There is no command key. This is the world we live in. This is why I can't switch computers, not because the operating systems are better or worse, but because I have muscle memory at this point. And so I pay too much for a computer every time, because that's where the keys are. You can also say in this case, if I wanted it to be slightly different on a Mac, I could give it a Mac shortcut. This is useful if you're trying to make a file that you are sharing, whether as a VS Code extension, which we'll talk about later, but like if you're, I guess like if you're syncing your settings and you're on 2 different computers, I don't know how you live like that, but like, whatever. You can theoretically specify it for a different OS to be a different keystroke. So if you find that like, oh, that key means something on Linux, right, then you can choose to like do something slightly different in that case. Cool. The other ones we saw before, which are these like multi-stroke key bindings. And so like, for instance, one of the ones that I use a lot is, let's say I have 2 panes and I can't see anything anymore and I'm frustrated and I want to cry. One of the ones where you can just kill an entire editor group is Command K, then W. And that is just you hit Command K and then W real quick, right? And it will, I won't save. Close that entire editor group, right? You can make these yourself. By simply doing something, you know, it's a comma in this case, or a space rather. So if you did like Command K, Control backtick, good luck typing, good luck switching your finger from the Command key to the Control key and getting that dance down. But should you accomplish that muscle memory, right, now you can kind of buy yourself an extra like almost like namespace for some of these keyboard shortcuts, because now you hit Command K, and if you get to the next one quick enough, I would probably not choose another modifier, but you, like we saw before, it was Command K, W. So you hit Command K, and then you hit W, and then like it'll close the entire editor tab. So if you ever see those, or if you want to like do something like that, you can theoretically have one followed by another and buy yourself a little bit more space. Like I said, that is probably for the use case in which you are doing some very like, you know what you're doing at that point. I cannot come up with a hypothetical situation in which you would need to do that, but one time, maybe 3 years from now, you'll be like, I need that. And I'm glad we did this together. Cool. I'm gonna put that back. As you can see, this one, for instance, for defining key binding is Command K, so you just double tap that one. And you could also just press whatever you want in case you don't want to remember the weird syntax, right? So you could do like, I don't know, Shift Control F1, right? And that will be the new keystroke. It will put a new one in there. I would probably use that visual editor that you saw before, but it's up to you as well. Cool. Questions, comments, concerns, cries of outrage on key bindings. Like, don't get carried away because you will do the thing where you set up a bunch and don't remember any of them.
Can you chain commands together so like you have one key binding that could do multiple commands at once?
I love when you ask a question that is like, I'm ready for. The question was, can you have one keystroke that does multiple things? No-ish. Not out of the box. There is an extension called multi-command, which has 139,000 installs. So you are not the first person to ask this question. And you can install this, and you can kind of see what the syntax looks like, where like the command will be this extension.multicommand.execute, but then it has a bunch of things you can kind of like type in a row. So like you would set up the individual ones, and then you could have it like, you know, it's kind of like a macro in Vim, right? Where you can kind of say, do, you know, in this case, it's like cursor down 3 times, which is a thing, I guess. But like you can put together an entire sequence of things and chain stuff together. You just need an extension. Many times, if it is not built in, the answer is there's probably an extension for that. And the nice part is like the extension like API is very, like when we look at some of the extensions in a little bit, it should make it very clear how crazy you can take it. You could build a full-size app inside of VS Code, right? And there's many reasons why you might want to do that insofar that like a lot of stuff is taken care of for you, right? Like you don't have to like package your own Electron app then, or like host your own website. You can just like have an extension. We will see an official first-party extension later that like very much walks that line of app with inside of an app, right? Which could be useful for a lot of various use cases. We'll even build a very simple version because like most of the work is not necessarily VS Code related. It's regular old JavaScript. So we'll look at some examples towards the end of building our own extensions as well. It's going to be great. And it is one of those things where my hope is like, at the time you're like, yeah, that's cool. And then a week from now you're like, I can do that thing that I want to do. Like, you almost definitely can. Like, we're building one, I work at this company where we build a developer tool called Temporal, but then the ability to like spin up the server and spin down the server, open the given workflow in the browser, or like see the list of running workflows. You can do that all from the editor, and you can kind of like take the thing that you work on, or something, you know, this is obviously we're building this for consumers of the product, right, to kind of like be integrated in there as well and like be able to spin up all those things very easily. And it's like shockingly not that hard. You know, there's a lot of APIs to learn, but it's fine. Cool, let's talk a little bit about the integrated terminal after we do a video dump.
Look at that, there we go.